Copenhagen Pride Week 2020.com. .dk. Yes, I will give the word to you guys.
Thank you. And everyone can hear us? Is that okay? Yeah. Yes, let's do that. Make sure I don't flip over. So the event today is called How Do You Prove You're Gay? And it is based on the fact that Nicholas and I have talked with members of LGBT Asylum about which questions you get from the authorities when you are applying for asylum and which questions the authorities kind of put weight on when they're trying to determine whether they believe the fact that you're actually what you say you are. Do you want to present yourself, Nicholas? I'm a contact person in LGBT Asylum and a member of the board and have been in LGBT Asylum for a couple of years.
I'm officially a refugee in Denmark, so I've been with LGBT Asylum from the moment that I actually started my application. So I've been in Denmark for about 3 years, so it means I've been with a group for just about that time.
And before we get to talking about the questions themselves, we just want to give you guys a warning that as you saw in the program, this event is advertised as what we called an interactive event, which means that some of the questions that we have gathered, we will try to ask you, the audience. It will, I think, mostly be for the people who are in the room, as I think it will be a bit difficult to ask questions to the people at home. But we hope that you'll play along with this. Some of the questions are very personal, as it is about sexual orientation and gender identity. It's completely okay to not want to play along when we're doing this, and then just let us know, or for the sake of the experiment, it's also completely okay to make up an answer if you don't feel comfortable talking about yourself or your own experiences.
Yeah, but please do not be put off by the fact that they are quite personal. These are the questions that the authorities will ask an applicant like myself. So we just want you to get a feel of what goes on. Yep.
Yeah, and just to lay the baseline of why is it that we talk about this, and why is it that determining whether you're actually gay is relevant. And now when I say gay, I don't mean it as that we're only talking about gay men. I mean LGBT in general. And you will see that a lot of these questions that we have brought are very binary in their formulations. They're very much talking about the same sex or the opposite sex. They're very normative in the way that they're formulated. That's not us that have made those questions up. Those are the types of questions that people are met with. So just if that sticks out to you in any way, it's just a reflection of the world that asylum seekers and refugees in Denmark are met with. So what is a refugee? A refugee is a person who has a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion. And that is as defined in the Refugee Convention. So when we talk about asylum for LGBT people, it goes under the particular social group and has been under this umbrella since 2012 in Denmark. So when you're applying for asylum, you need to kind of prove that you fall under this definition of the Refugee Convention, which means that you have to prove that you're persecuted, and that you're persecuted because you belong to this particular social group, being LGBT. But in many cases, immigration already denies it, because how can you be persecuted because you're LGBT if they don't even believe that you're gay? And that's where all of these questions come into play, and that's why it's relevant to discuss this. The burden of proof lies almost completely with the asylum seeker, and it is a heavy burden to prove. It's not enough to self-identify. It's not enough to say, I'm gay, I'm a lesbian, I am trans, I am bi. You are questioned on your life, your sexual history, your relationship, your reflections of your relationships, your sexual practice, and your behavior or your performance. How do you look a certain way? All of these things we'll get into more detail on. And based on these answers, Immigration Services and the Refugees Appeals Board will make decisions as per whether your credibility is good enough that they believe in your claimed sexual orientation or gender identity. Yeah. So before we start actually asking questions to you guys, I just want you guys to take a moment and just think to yourself. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to prove your sexual orientation? Because that is the reality people face. And then, in what situations have you been forced to prove your sexual orientation? And then what kind of questions do you actually think are the questions that can prove your sexual orientation?
Yep. So it could be that no one has been, because I know Denmark has been a very liberal country for a very long time, so it could be that most of you have never been in that situation. If that's the case, that's fine, but then you could take a moment just now to think about how would you explain to somebody that you're gay in order to prove to them that you're gay or you fall anywhere in between the LGBT plus spectrum. Yep, so I hope that we are free enough to be as interactive as possible. We'll be asking the questions, but do not hesitate to throw any questions back. Yep. So
so we'll ask you the questions now. Everyone in here, if there's someone who definitely does not want to be asked any questions, can you just put up your hand and then we'll avoid you? Everyone is in for playing? That's nice. Thank you. Okay. So, some of the first questions you'll meet, they're opening questions, just establishing a baseline. And Nicholas, could you point out someone and ask them a question?
I'll ask the lady in glasses here. Yes, this is why I feel very comfortable opening with you. When did you first realize that you were gay?
When I was 17 and a half.
Okay. And what was the occasion that made you realize, boom, I am gay?
I felt madly in love.
Oh, okay. That's great. And how did you explore that side of sexuality?
Well, I invited the person out, and we ended up in my first same-sex relationship that lasted around 5 months.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, that's great. That's great.
So those are some of the first questions. We would call them fairly easy questions, just opening up.
Yep.
So questions like, when did you first realize that you're gay? What happened at that specific time to make you realize that you felt like this? As if there has to be some sort of event that triggers your gayness. How did you explore your sexuality to become certain that you were actually gay? And then a question like, what was the time frame between when you started to question your sexuality to the time when you started to physically explore your sexual orientation? And if that wasn't immediate, then how come you waited so long? Yeah.
And you have to realize, if somebody is going to apply for asylum and say, I need asylum because I'm gay, then it means that it's not just the persecution or the fear of persecution, it's also the fact that you cannot express that sexuality. So when you realize that you're gay, some may not even have a chance to express that sexuality. So you cannot just realize I'm gay, then you go, okay, now I'm looking for another guy, or I'm a girl, now I'm looking for another girl, because you're in an environment that prohibits that. So it will not allow for it to happen. But then, why did it take you so long? Duh.
So we'll move on to the next question, which is about relationship history. And Nicholas, maybe you want to choose someone else?
Yeah. Have you ever had a same-sex relation? I'm going to ask you here.
Yes, I've had many. I've even been married to 3 different men, but I'm single now. Next question.
Pretty girl. Have you ever been in a straight relationship?
Yes, my first was 12 years with a lady.
Did you ever have sex? You know, straight sex?
Yes, we have 2 children.
How could you have sex if you're gay? With a woman, I mean.
To me, the sexual activity is just a physical thing, but what determines your sexuality is your feelings. So once you bring feelings into it, then you know you're home.
Yeah, but sorry, can I just interject? In the 12 years, did the feelings ever come out, or what was happening with you as a person in a straight relationship and yet hovering?
I had sex with men at the same time as I was married, all 12 years, and
but
my ex-wife knew about it.
Ah, great.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
So now when you say you're gay, what is it that you don't like about women?
Sex. All the rest is fine.
Good question, good answer. Yeah. So you get asked a lot of questions about whether what is your history with same-sex relationships, what is your history with relationships with people of the opposite sex, whether you had sex, how could you have sex with a person of the opposite sex if you're gay. That's a very common thing that immigration services kind of has this misconception that if you're gay, it would not even be physically possible for you to ever have sex with someone of the opposite sex. And kind of also a need for you to have an explanation, that you have to have a distinct dislike for the opposite sex in order to be gay. And I myself, as well as many other gay people, have had relationships, or at least interactions with people of the opposite sex before. That does not make you less gay, which is something that's kind of lacking in the questioning tactics. Oh, definitely, and this is all and most of this is taking a starting point in gay relationships, because those are the majority of the cases in LGBT asylum, and as I said, we've gathered our cases from there. But definitely, bi cases are, if I would say, even more difficult, because having to explain why couldn't you just, pretend to be straight, or why couldn't you just stick with only the opposite sex, that is a whole different thing that is very, very difficult to argue and to explain to immigration services, and the questions that come from that are very problematic as well.
And even when you say you're gay, they'll still try to find out if you've ever been in a hetero relationship. They'll still say, but have you ever been with a girl? So I guess it gets more complicated from there.
And that would disqualify you?
Like she said, I get the feeling that it's much hard, when we talk about asylum, it's much harder for a bisexual guy than for a gay guy when you just say you're completely gay, because they say, right, if you're fearing persecution, then you can go back home and just stick to a hetero side of things. You can deny this other side of yourself.
And also, you see it a lot with women, is that oftentimes women who come from countries where you seek asylum because you're a lesbian, the way that you are treated and the persecution that you face are things like forced marriage or correctional rape, which means that both of those are things that, in a sense, are perceived as heterosexual, which means that the credibility for is extremely difficult to build up, especially for lesbian women in the asylum application procedure. Then there are questions, and I don't know if we could get another person. Are you okay to answer questions? Yes. How do you feel about your sexual orientation?
Well, I feel good.
You feel good? So try to say some more. Do you have any conflicting feelings or?
No, not really. No, I like men. I tend to fall in love with them as well.
Can I ask you a question? I know that was a little bit direct, but when I look at myself, I think that it's been a process. So starting from early childhood, teenagers, growing into adult, were you always at a point where like maybe 8, 10, I'm probably gay, I am gay. Teenagehood, I'm definitely gay and I'm fine with it up until now?
I think I was around, I'm not sure, around 15 when I was started thinking about that there's something wrong with me. Yeah, and then I had some gay experience with a classmate. Besides that, I have been with a woman once before. That wasn't really the thing, so yeah.
So, would you say that for you, you feel like you are, like your sexual orientation is not something that you can control?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you say why you feel that your sexual orientation is not something that you can control?
Because you can't. It's pretty easy. You know, you can keep lying to yourself, but in the end of things, you're just gonna end up hurting yourself and being confused or thinking bad things.
Yeah.
That's my belief.
So, questions like this, like how do you feel about your sexual orientation, kind of expecting mixed emotions are very, I'm sorry if we're making you a bit uncomfortable. And questions like asking people to kind of say, why is it that they feel that their sexual orientation is not something that they can control, are questions that we have seen being asked of asylum seekers. And I think especially the last one is problematic, to say the least. Then we come to the point of social media, which is also something that immigration services often look at when they are trying to determine whether they believe a person's sexual orientation. So can I just, everyone here, show of hands, how many of you have Facebook or Instagram pages where your sexual orientation is very visible? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So can I ask you? Sure. You
what do you want?
You have a lot of rainbows and gay stuff on your
I
Facebook.
have so much to tell you. You know what to start.
Yeah. Well, how come you have so much gay stuff?
Because my dad is Muslim, my mom is Catholic, and this is two words you never understand. And when I told my dad, "Hey, Dad, I'm gay," he was just a protest. Move on, find a woman and get kids, and you will find a lucky you. You don't understand.
So when you have all of these things on your social media, are you sure that it's not just something you're doing to kind of pretend so that the authorities will believe you?
No, actually, no. I like social media because I told my story, who I am. I told the story who I feel, what I feel, and I can tell my parents, my sisters, my uncles, and who don't live in Denmark, who I am, and they can see who I am, and they can see what part I am in Denmark. Yes.
Yeah. And how many in here have Facebooks or Instagrams or stuff like that are maybe a bit more discreet and not so like full of rainbows and queer stuff? Can I ask you guys? how come you don't have any of that stuff on your social media?
Well, it's not all of me.
Yeah?
I have a lot of other things that I feel are important to
Yeah.
tell if you were to talk about who I am as a person.
Yeah?
So I don't put so much emphasis on showing it all the way. Everybody knows who I am, and even my work, mates, everything. There's no secrets really. But I don't really feel that it's
but then why would
such a
people-
great story to tell. I mean, I don't see any of my colleagues telling me, "Yay, I'm straight today. Come and see me," doing something straight.
But
I mean,
but then, like, are you feel like you're, like, are you sure that you're not just then, like, when you're telling people that you're gay, like, that's not reflected on your online life? Is it because you're maybe not being truthful when you say you're gay?
I don't understand the question.
Okay. No?
No, but I mean, if you look at it the other way around, if people are really in the closet and they show something that is gay related, it's a huge step to come out online. Yeah. Even that, because there are uncles, like you're saying, there are people at home who might really take offense. And I don't have that. I have the privilege of not having that type of family background. So I came out and nobody really, okay, well, fine. That type of stuff. It's not big drama,
So,
He hasn't. You said you guys, so the other one hasn't spoken.
Okay.
Well, I don't think I have to tell everybody this part of me. So the people that I care about, they know who I am. But I have a lot of different people from work and, who would probably not understand. So it would be difficult. It would be quite difficult.
Yeah.
So, but it's not like I'm hiding it online. I can post something from Pride. If people notice and they have a problem with it, then it's their problem. But I don't have the feeling that I have to tell everybody necessarily.
Yeah. So, we got, when we were like writing out to people in our group and asking people what types of questions they had gotten from immigration, there were both like half of our group who were told that they had been questioned very intensely on how come they have no rainbows on their social media, because how come you don't stand by your sexual orientation if you say you're gay? But then on the other hand, people who had a lot of the stuff on their social media, they were questioned as per whether that was just something they were doing to try and improve their case. So it's kind of like a situation where you can't really win. You have to have just the perfect amount of queer stuff on your social media to make it seem true, but not performative. Yeah. Now we move on to the subject of family.
Yeah.
Does someone want to
Volunteer.
volunteer to answer questions
The
about
first
family?
question about family. Quite sensitive, so you can just put up your hand if you'd be the first person to answer the first question on family.
Should we just... you want to... Great.
Yeah. Who knows that you're gay?
Everybody. I've been on national TV many times.
Great. I'm going to ask you. I don't know your name, but yeah. When did your parents find out that you're? I don't know how you express yourself. Gay. Trans. Yeah.
No, gay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When did your parents find out?
I texted my mom when I was 17, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was bi.
Yeah. Does she accept you?
Yes.
Okay.
Fully.
Okay. Great. But on the other side, if you're coming from a homophobic country, the question will be like, how come you're still talking with your mother or your father if they refuse to accept you? Then how would you say? What would your answer be? In a case that your mother had refused to accept your sexuality, but you're still talking, then what would be your response? Why are you still in touch with your mother if she's denied your sexuality?
If she's denied it?
Yeah. Would you still be talking to your mother if she had denied your sexuality?
I think so. Depends on how she's treating me or acting in front of me. But yeah, as long as I can be me, I have no problem.
Yep. Yep.
It's kind of hard to answer because I don't know the situation. So
it is. It is. So of course people will always face the question of who knows you're gay. Often the answer will be no one, or just one or two people, or a very limited amount of people, unless, in some cases, of course, it's a lot more. And the subject of parents knowing that you're gay is usually also something that is connected to a lot of shame and a lot of problems in your origin country. And then you often see, or in some cases you see, that people haven't broken off contact with their family, even though the family doesn't accept them, in some cases. And then that's also something that is kind of, that you're confronted with, and that you are expected to have a very qualified and reflected answer to why it is that you choose to remain in contact with someone who doesn't accept you. And doesn't that then mean that you don't really have that big problems in your home country?
Yep.
And now we get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lady sitting at the back in red. You've got glasses on top of your head. No.
No.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Can I try the lovely golden lady in front here? Second line, yeah, you. Are you open to questioning? Yeah. Great. Yeah, the first one. Can you name everyone you've had sex with, when and where?
No. I haven't kept track.
And just a show of hands in the room, how many people would be able to do that?
You can. You can, okay.
3, maybe 4 people in the room of, I would say, what are we, like 25, 30 people? So, exactly. It is a very straight way of thinking. Yeah.
But if you do, sometimes if you do get lucky, if you're in a homophobic country, you do get lucky. You might have had 1 or 2 experiences. Then you're going to be asked, what was the color of the room, and where did he pick you up? If you drove around, where did he take you?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It could have been 8 years ago. What literally they could ask what color of shirt he wore. So
yeah, so you are asked very detailed questions about the situation. So for example, like Nicholas is saying, like a question like, what was the color of the walls in the room that you had sex when you had sex with your first partner? Or about that Grindr hookup 8 years ago, which street did he pick you up on in his car? And then, by the way, which route did you take when you were driving around? And then, how come you don't know his name if you've had sex? Yeah. Which, of course, like you also pointed out, is a very straight way of thinking. Yeah. And if that wasn't normative enough, yeah.
What do you think? What are they checking?
Well, what they're trying to check is whether it is self-experienced. So what they're trying to check is that they think that it would be easy for you to just say, I met someone on Grindr and we hooked up and he picked me up in his car. And then they try to test whether it is a true memory and like a true experience of yours to ask you detailed questions. Because the thought that they have is kind of like that detailed questions like that are not stuff that you, if it's a lie, that you then can make up and remember the next time in the next interview when you're asked again, and they double check whether you answer the same thing. So if you said the walls were blue and the next time they were green, then that's an issue.
Yeah, but then that is also complex because, like, if it happened 8 years ago, and you have to realize that when you're being interviewed, you're under a lot of stress. It's 8 years ago. It's quite hard to be 100% accurate with those details.
Yeah.
If it happened 8 years ago, somebody's going to say, but which street did you drive on, or what was the name of the street that you're on? You know?
Yeah. And then we have some of the next questions. Do someone in this room have children?
He does.
You have children. And you also have children. How can you be gay and have children? Mads?
It's a good question. It just seemed like the thing to do at the time, and it was possible for me, and it made sense. Mm?
Yeah.
You can have kids without having sex, you know, if you manage it. Yeah.
And who's had kids through sex? Yeah, but how is that possible?
If you're
you
gay.
have to explain that if you're gay.
I grew up in a very conservative Christian family setting, so the thing was
You have
that
to.
was expected to get married to a woman and blah 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 blah. So I tried to fit in, I suppose, and did the motion, but not with the feelings.
Yep.
I would say.
Yep. Great. Where are we?
Yeah. And there are questions like, for example, how can you be gay if you have children? A lot of, for example, women from sub-Saharan Africa come here, lesbians, and have children. And that's again something from a heteronormative perspective is not perceived as something that is gay or possible if you're a lesbian. Questions like, how come you met with your partner if it was dangerous? As if just because it was dangerous meant that no one was ever going to meet up with their partner ever. Questions like, how can you be gay if your partner, who's a man, wears a dress? I bet you would say that the people you hook up with are gay, right? Yeah. That's a question immigration asked. Now we get to the juicy stuff.
Yeah. The guy at the back in pink, are you open to questioning? Yes, you? Sure, great. When did you have your first sexual experience?
When?
Yes.
When I was 19.
Okay. Where on the body did you touch?
I guess. Yeah, everywhere, I mean.
And see, that's a vague answer, so that would be seen as not credible.
Yeah.
Because you're not being accurate.
Oh, but it was, of course, breast, ass.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Great. And one more?
Sure.
What type of sex was it, or what type of sex did you engage in?
It was penetration sex.
Okay, great. Thanks. No more. You're great.
Thank you. You're a trooper.
But the next question will be from a guy who gets a blowjob from a girl, and the question will be, but how do you get a blowjob from a girl because you're gay? Yeah.
We kind of covered that earlier.
Yeah, we kind
were
of
like,
covered. Yeah. So it's not supposed to be possible, and you did talk about Grindr message history.
Yeah, but then and then the last, and we kind of put this one under the category of sexual practice. But usually, immigration services will also ask to see your phone, including all your apps. So they will also check all of your Grindr messages and your Grindr history. All of that will also be something that they will look at and verify if they find that to be something that they feel is relevant. Yep. And then we have the last category, that we called LGBT specific knowledge. So we could do this as like a pub quiz for everyone. How many colors are in the rainbow flag? Quick. What is happening in the LGBT?
No, but does it make sense? Because if you live in a homophobic country that criminalizes any gay activity, then it's obvious that you are going to be ignorant about these things. So when somebody says how many colors are in the rainbow flag, have I actually seen a rainbow flag before? You know?
Good point. And then questions like, what is happening in the queer community at the moment? Or they don't say queer. What is happening in the rainbow community at the moment was the actual question. Does someone have any ideas? Pride, for example. Yes. And then, do you want to take the last one?
Yep.
Could we maybe ask someone who's not from Copenhagen, just for the fun of it? Is someone here not from Copenhagen? You're not from Copenhagen. Or the guy in the back, we haven't talked to you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you name...
You're not from Denmark. Great,
great,
even better.
Great, even better, even better. You fit the criteria perfectly. So can you name some gay clubs in Copenhagen?
I can, but I'm not.
Yeah,
I'll put it that way.
But how long have you been in Copenhagen for?
2-3 years.
Okay, that's great. That's great.
How many could you name a couple of weeks after you had arrived?
It depends, because when you're an expat, it's completely different. When you first come here, you don't know anything.
Yeah.
So you go to a club and you don't even know if that's a gay club or a straight club until you figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't know if that explains, because you don't know the gay culture, like the Danish gay culture and the gay community, how they act. Because I come from Greece, so literally you have no way of differentiating a straight club in Greece and a gay club in Greece. So I don't know if...
Yeah.
Probably not the best person to ask.
Well, so the thing is that when you come here as an asylum seeker, you don't get to live in Copenhagen. The first couple of weeks you live in Sandholm, which is outside of Allerød, north of Copenhagen, and then after a while you get transferred to an asylum center, all of which are in Jylland at the moment, and usually quite far away from, for example, Aarhus and Copenhagen. So asking these questions to people who are seeking asylum in Denmark are not super indicative of their sexual orientation. Yeah, so we have the questions here.
But if before we get to that, does anybody think of credible questions to say, if someone had to prove their sexuality, these are the kind of questions that should be asked? Maybe just two people to speak on that, like how can somebody prove credibly their sexuality to you? What would be the right questions to ask?
No. You have an idea.
I think, like I mentioned before, that you would have to talk more about yourself, identifying how you identify yourself and your feelings, because the feelings is where it differs to me. Anyone can fuck a cow, but it doesn't make you a bull. I mean, it's the feelings that changes who you're attracted to.
And you do have a very good point, but then when we are talking about immigration, there's the point of credibility, because feelings are not tangible. It's not something that they can see or feel. So when you're here, it's a very high burden of proof to prove yourself that what you're saying is indeed what is the case. Do you have another view at the back? Did you have another view? No? You were about to say something, yeah? Oh, you're just talking. Okay. Anybody else with a different view?
Well, we'll... So the question is then, what should be asked? And the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the UNHCR, they have a very handy handbook for determining status of refugees. And they have a specific chapter of that handbook relating to claims to refugee status based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And the main point of that is self-identification. So that is actually the same thing that we, that you were mentioning, and that we take for face value whenever we meet someone here at Pride or anywhere else, in Denmark at least. Usually if someone says they're gay, or that they're bi, or that they're trans, they are. The UNHCR says that because of a lot of things. This is not just some gut feeling about what is right and what is fair to say and what is not fair to say. This is actually a human rights issue. The right to seek and enjoy asylum, that is a human right that is mentioned many places, amongst others in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But then so is also the right to privacy in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but also the right to private life in the European Convention of Human Rights. And I'm a law student, so forgive me for this. And then there's this a piece of law called the Yoga Carta Principles that also says that each person's self-defined sexual orientation and gender identity is integral to their personality and is one of the most basic aspects of self-determination, dignity, and freedom. So all of this is stuff that needs to be taken into consideration when we sit and we look at what we can, within the boundaries of human rights, ask people to determine whether they qualify for refugee status. So a lot of these questions that we asked today to you guys, and that people are being asked in the asylum procedure, are questions that are incredibly intimate, that goes specifically pertains to your sexual practice. And questions like that are actually potentially in violation of the right to private life and the right to privacy.
Because like I was just talking to you, I was actually cringing, just asking that question. It felt like such an invasive, you're really crossing a boundary, So
the UNHCR puts forward these guidelines as what you can put weight on when you are trying to determine whether someone is actually LGBT, because it's fair, states get asylum applications and you have to prove and lift the burden of proof that you actually meet the criteria for refugee status. So some degree of questioning is to be expected. The UNHCR says that self-identification is the above all determining factor, but that they also have a lot of other points that you could talk about. For example, your childhood, your young life, the feeling of being different. Like you were saying, the feeling life, because that's actually also, the UNHCR holds that's actually also one of the things that are difficult to fake. It's easy to say, well, I met up with someone, we banged. Like, that's not very difficult to say necessarily. But describing your conflicted feeling, life of feelings and stuff like that is more difficult to describe and is something that can actually show some sort of credibility. They say that you could talk about self-realization, so when did you realize you were gay, what made you realize that you're gay. And they also mention that it's fair to talk about romantic and sexual relationships, but they then have this major caveat that says that detailed questions about the applicant's sex life should be avoided. Interviewers and decision makers need to bear in mind that sexual orientation and gender identity are about a person's identity, whether or not that identity is manifested through sexual acts. And if you think about it, like when you were describing that, you fell madly in love, but did you only turn gay the moment you had sex? Or were you also maybe a little gay when you were just in love? Yeah. They also mention stuff like community relationships, so like activism and being parts of LGBT groups and stuff like that. and reflections about your identity and connection to religion and faith. And the main part, because all of these are things that Immigration Services and the Refugees Appeals Board actually do cover in their questioning, the issue is just that they're using it very much as a checklist, where you need to fulfill every one of these in the way that they're expecting you to answer it. And if you answer not in the way that they're expecting you to answer, so for example, if your family does not accept you and you still are in contact with your family, that somehow conflicts with how they perceive that you were supposed to react to that. And those are the kind of things that are big issues in the system today. Yeah. And I think that, unless you have more to add, I think that was what we have prepared as part of the program, but I don't know if anyone has any questions.
I know that we got a question online, and you will get it here. Why do you think a lot of people, both straight but also from the LGBT community, want bi people to choose between male or female and say bisexuality doesn't exist? We just have to make up our minds.
I think that's a very big question that deserves a whole hour to be discussed on its own. I think that biphobia, I think that that's an issue that bi people are faced with in their daily lives, both here and everywhere else, but also at immigration. Yeah.
I have a question concerning translation of these interviews, because we know that there's not just the asylum seeker present and immigration present, there's also a translator present. And what is your experience with the quality of the translation and the neutrality of the translator? I translate for immigration, so it should be fair to say, but I would like to hear your comments on that. Thank you.
Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I would speak. I will comment about that in a personal word, because I've had a personal experience. But I don't think the first question online has been answered. Has it?
I think that I kind of tried to answer it, but I think that's a very big question. Yeah. The question about bi erasure, and I don't know if I have any meaningful. Yeah. Reflections about it, except that it sucks and it's not okay, and that's something that we are continuously trying to.
I think bottom line, it stems from biphobia. It's the same way that people are homophobic. If we learn to accept each other, to say this is who he is, then the world would be a better place. That's just about it.
But to get back to the translators.
Translators. Personally, in my own case, initially my case was rejected from immigration, and the way the process works is that it's automatically escalated to Flygtningenævnet, you say?
Yeah, the Refugees Appeals
Board. So the first time that I had a hearing there, and you only get a hearing one time, then they decide whether you can stay in Denmark or you have to leave, was I think on the 12th of July last year. And when we started, like when the case started, when the session started, I could hear that the translator had trouble picking up my English, but initially I didn't mind because I knew my lawyer could understand me perfectly and the judges could understand perfectly. But it was so bad that the judges halted the session and said, "We are going to stop because your translator, we can hear that is having problems. So we advise that we stop for now, and we'll refer your case to another date when we can accord you a translator who's proficient." So, and then
the translator tried to blame you and said that you were having too thick of an accent, that he couldn't
understand you. And I was speaking too fast and every kind of problem. But then I realized I was lucky because I had chosen to have my case processed in English. Now, can you imagine someone from a country like Iran who speaks, what do they use in Iran?
Farsi.
Yeah, someone who's speaking Farsi. I was lucky because the judge or the judges could understand me directly, right? And my lawyer could. But imagine someone who's not being understood by the judges. They'll just take what the translator is saying and say, "Oh, this is what he's saying," and yet it's... Because, sometimes the difference of about 10% will be the deciding factor on whether or not you will get asylum. So it's a very...
and we do definitely have examples of translators, for example, using derogative words. So using, like, for example, when they're talking about gay people, they will use a word in the person's language that kind of like is the like the word of like faggot or something like that when they're talking about gay people. We've seen examples of translators who don't even want to say gay people and who then just translate your partner to like your friend or something like that, which when you're seeking asylum because of your sexual orientation is kind of integral to your case. And then, of course, there are also a lot of very, very good translators. Those just are not the stories we end up talking about because, as you probably know through your work, the translator is kind of, it's invisible until it becomes an issue. And yes, in asylum cases, tiny details
make
matter.
the difference. Yeah.
Other questions?
Yes, I actually have another one from one of our online viewers. How does LGBT asylum influence change in Danish law, and in the way immigration services classifies one as LGBTQIA, and what can you do about it?
Well, in LGBT Asylum, we try to work on many levels. We are contact persons who are assisting asylum activists in the individual cases. We try to show up for people's, interviews at immigration, or to go with them to meetings with the lawyer and to the Refugees Appeals Board. We write statements for people when they are going to the Refugees Appeals Board. But then, of course, we're also working on the more systemic level, where Janaba, who's sitting here, who's our head of secretariat, and other people from our group are regularly having meetings with politicians, and we have a group that's working together with immigration and has meetings once in a while with them. There has also been talk of different things. We do have, it's difficult. We are trying to influence whatever we can, and both on a systematic level or a systemic level, and also on each individual case. And a big part of the work that a contact person in LGBT Asylum does is also to prepare people for the types of questions that they will be faced with, so that at least it doesn't come as a shock when you are in the situation. For example, make a timeline of people you've had sex with. It's a pretty good thing to do before you show up. You look almost scared of the thought of that. Yeah. More questions? No? Then I think that we'd round off for today. I have no idea what the time is, but it's ticking.
Still have quite some minutes, but I have a question on a more practical thing. How many do you help a year, and where do you get the resources to help people?
So since LGBT Asylum was started in, 2012, there has been over 400 asylum cases passed through the organization. At the moment, we have some 40 cases active, open. Currently, right now, with the current political climate and the corona situation, the inflow of new people seeking asylum in Denmark has diminished almost completely, so we don't see many new people coming in. We are crossing our fingers and hoping and trying to convince the government that LGBT will be one of the parameters that they use when they are choosing quota refugees, of which they just announced that they will start taking 200, which is still a lot less than we used to do, but better than 0. Was that answer enough?
Yes, on one of the parts, but where do you get resources to help people to do this?
We don't get any public funding at all. We are relying solely on private foundations and private people giving donations. So please do that.
And you can explain how you spend that money.
Yes, and we are an incredibly cost-heavy organization because our members don't have a lot of money. So whenever we have an event or a meeting, we pay for the tickets, which is the vast majority of the money that comes into LGBT Asylum goes into transporting asylum activists and refugees to our meetings and to our preparations and to our social events.
Yes, let's get a question from the floor.
Nu skal jeg formulere det på engelsk. Which kind of groups are contacting you by mobile, messenger, emails? Which kind of social media do they export?
So we get a lot of people through Facebook. We have a Facebook account that people sometimes write to. We have a phone that's open, the asylum phone that people can call. We have lots of posters and flyers and stuff lying around in the asylum centers that we pray and hope that people find. And then we also rely a lot on word of mouth. So let's say, for example, that Nicholas was in an asylum center and he found someone on his Grindr that could maybe be invited to our next meeting. That's also a good source of recruitment. Also, of course, like people who work in and around asylum centers and asylum seekers. A lot of those people working in the clinics for the Red Cross, or people working in Sandholm, the contact persons who are there. A lot of those people know us, and if they come across someone who discloses their sexual orientation to them, they're usually very good at referring them to us. And then in the last LGBTI action plan from the former government, it was actually written in to that action plan that LGBT Asylum should be contacted, or that asylum seekers who work queer should be informed of our organization. Yeah?
Can I just add to that?
Yeah.
And we also have quite a lot of people who contact us through email, both here in Denmark, but also from abroad. And and now that Denmark is not open to accept asylum seekers right now, we just know that there are so many LGBT plus people around the world that are struggling from torture, from killing, from suffering, that we don't help here in Denmark. And okay, I have to stop because I get quite emotional. Yeah.
Yeah. So we put out a report, like a small, note. I think it's like 6 months ago or something like that, about all of the people from who are, either still in their countries or who are somewhere in a UNHCR camp, in a Red Cross camp, in camps around the world, who are still facing persecution, even though they have fled their original source of persecution. So we continuously get those people asking for our assistance, asking for our help. We are unfortunately only able to help people who are in Denmark already, because that is what we can do and that's what we can influence. But there are so many people out there who are still in a bad situation. And that's why we need to start taking more quota refugees.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I have time, and after that I have a question from online.
Yes.
Okay. Then I just want to say two things. We actually have another event on Thursday, 2:30, also here talking about quota refugees. And then I also want to say, now you have also experienced today what kind of questions that people are being asked. And just to know that most of the people that will be asked those questions will be denied asylum. So even though you come and you are actually an LGBT plus person and you have answered questions, and when we talk about interviews, I mean, it's interviews between maybe 3 and 12 hours, So after that, most people will actually be denied asylum and will, go back to and face persecution in their countries of origin. Okay, but we have another question.
And the question from online is, what kind of educational background does the professional at the migration service have?
Oh, I'm actually not sure. I think that varies. Some people there have a law background, but that's not everyone. I know of people who have studied area studies, so like Middle Eastern studies or stuff like that. People who have studied different liberal arts. Yeah, there's a lot of different backgrounds that can work in the questioning area. That's not my area of expertise, so send an email to them and ask. I don't know. Yeah, but just to all of you guys, thank you so much for participating and letting us make you a bit uncomfortable. And I hope it was informative for you. Yeah, thanks for playing along.
Yes, a big thank you to LGBT